In 2008, a young hedge fund manager named Chris Sacca got laid off from Google. He had some savings, not a fortune, just enough to feel safe. And almost immediately, he did what most people do when they finally have money in the bank. He spent it. Not recklessly, not on yachts or designer watches, just on the normal things. A nicer apartment, a newer car, better restaurants, the things that feel like rewards when you've worked hard. And within months, the cushion was gone. He had to borrow $12 from a friend to eat. $12. That's the guy who later became one of Silicon Valley's most celebrated investors, early backer of Twitter, Uber, Instagram, and dozens of other companies. A man who turned a second chance into a $1.2 billion fortune. But first, he had to learn the hardest lesson in personal finance. Having money in the bank is not the same as building wealth. What you do with that money in the first 90 days decides everything. Hi, I'm Julia, and if you've recently crossed that threshold, $10,000 in savings, first of all, congratulations.
That alone puts you ahead of the majority of adults in this country. But here's what nobody tells you at that moment. That $10,000 is also the most dangerous money you'll ever have, because it's just enough to feel free and just enough to destroy your future if you make the wrong moves. Today, I'm going to walk you through the 7 things you must stop doing the moment you hit $10,000. Not because they're obviously stupid, but because they look completely reasonable, and that's exactly what makes them so deadly. And stay with me through number 4, because that one is the mistake even financially educated people make, the one that keeps smart, hardworking people stuck at $10,000 for years. Mistake number 1, treating it like a reward instead of a resource. The moment most people see $10,000 in their account, something shifts in the brain, a feeling of arrival, like you finally made it to a checkpoint. And with that feeling comes a very human impulse to celebrate. A weekend trip, a new wardrobe refresh, a better phone because you've earned it. Maybe you upgrade your apartment because you can finally afford a nicer place. Maybe you finally say yes to the dinner you've been turning down for months. None of these things feel reckless. That's the trap. Because each individual decision is defensible. Together, they quietly dissolve the entire foundation you built. Jeff Bezos still drove his Honda Accord long after Amazon became a billion-dollar company. Not because he couldn't afford otherwise,
but because he understood that capital is fuel and you don't burn fuel to feel warm when you're trying to win a race. The mindset shift you need right now is this. $10,000 is not a reward, it is a tool, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on how you use it. Give yourself one small, meaningful celebration. Set a number, $100, $200, whatever feels right. Then close the door on lifestyle upgrades until your money is actually working for you, because the goal isn't to feel wealthy, the goal is to become wealthy. Mistake number 2, parking it all in a regular savings account and calling it done. Most people think that getting to $10,000 and putting it in savings is the responsible move. And look, it is better than spending it. But here's the truth that most banks will never tell you. If your savings account is earning 0.01% interest, you are slowly losing money. Not dramatically, not overnight, just quietly, month after month as inflation eats away at your purchasing power. Warren Buffett has said repeatedly that keeping too much cash is a mistake. He calls it a terrible long-term asset because it earns almost nothing while everything around you gets more expensive. Now, he isn't saying don't have any cash. He's saying don't worship it. Here's a simple structure that actually works.
Keep 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a high-yield savings account. And I mean a real high-yield account, not your standard checking account attached savings. Right now, you can find accounts offering 4% to 5% APY, which is radically different from the 0.01% your big bank is quietly giving you. Whatever exceeds your emergency fund, that money needs to be deployed into investments, into assets, into things that grow while you sleep. Leaving $10,000 idle in a standard account isn't being safe, it's being slowly poor. Mistake number 3, paying off the wrong debt first. Debt feels like one thing. It isn't. Not all debt is equal, and attacking it randomly or emotionally can actually cost you more in the long run. This is a mistake that even financially literate people fall into. Here's the math that matters. If you have a student loan at 4% interest and a credit card at 24% interest, every dollar you put toward the student loan instead of the credit card is costing you 20 cents per year, per dollar. Multiplied across thousands that's a gap that takes years to close. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime partner at Berkshire Hathaway, was almost obsessive about high-interest debt. He called it the greatest destroyer of wealth for ordinary people. Not because the amounts are always huge, but because of the psychological and financial compounding effect of carrying it for years. The rule is simple but non-negotiable. Any debt above 7 to 8% interest should be your first target, because no investment reliably beats that return with the same consistency. Eliminating high-interest debt is literally a guaranteed return. Once that's gone, low-interest debt like a mortgage or a student loan can coexist with investing. But while the high-interest debt lives, it is the single best investment you can make. Pay it first, then deploy the rest.
Mistake number 4, Waiting to invest until you know more. This is the one that quietly destroys more wealth than almost any other mistake on this list. Because it doesn't look like a mistake, it looks like responsibility. It sounds like, I just want to make sure I understand what I'm doing before I put money into the market. Reasonable, logical, completely financially devastating. Here's why. Time in the market beats timing the market. Every single study confirms this. A 25-year-old who invests $10,000 today into a simple index fund and never adds another dollar will have roughly $200,000 by retirement at historical average returns. A 35-year-old who does the exact same thing, about $100,000. Same investment, same fund, same discipline, half the outcome, just because of a 10-year delay. Peter Lynch, the legendary Fidelity Fund manager who averaged 29% annual returns for 13 years, had a saying. He said the real risk isn't losing money in the market. The real risk is not being in the market at all. Because sitting on the sidelines waiting to feel ready is how people miss the years that do all the heavy lifting. You don't need to understand every stock, every ETF, every economic theory. You need to start. A broad index fund, low fees, automatic contributions. The complexity can come later. The clock is already running.
Mistake number 5, upgrading your lifestyle every time your income goes up. There's a term for this in economics, lifestyle inflation, and it is the silent killer of every raise, every bonus, every windfall you will ever receive. It works like this. You earn more, so you spend more. Your standard of living rises to meet your income. And somehow, despite earning twice what you did 5 years ago, you still feel like you're running out of month before you run out of money. Sound familiar? Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx and one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in history, talked about this in an interview. She said that for years after her business started making real money, she kept her personal expenses almost identical to what they were before. Not because she had to, because she understood that the gap between what you earn and what you spend is the only number that actually matters. That gap is called your savings rate, and it is more important than your salary. Someone earning $50,000 and saving 30% will outbuild someone earning $150,000 and saving 5%, every time without exception. The math is merciless. Every raise you get from this point forward, commit to this rule. Put at least 50% of any income increase directly into savings or investments before it ever hits your checking account. Automate it, make it invisible, let the other half improve your life, but protect the gap. Mistake number 6, diversifying into things you don't understand. At some point, having $10,000 starts to feel like an invitation. Friends start talking about crypto, someone at work is flipping NFTs, a cousin is doing options trading, and suddenly a boring index fund feels like you're leaving money on the table. This is where a lot of first-time investors make a catastrophic mistake. They confuse diversification with speculation. They chase complexity because complexity feels sophisticated. Warren Buffett has one of the most quoted rules in investing. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. What people miss is the context behind that rule. Buffett never invests in things he doesn't understand, regardless of how much buzz surrounds them. He famously avoided the dot-com bubble, was ridiculed for it, and then watched the entire sector collapse while his portfolio held firm. True diversification is spreading risk across things you understand, not spreading confusion across things you've only seen on social media. If you cannot explain to a 10-year-old what an investment does and how it makes money, you should not put your $10,000 into it. Start with simple, master it, build from there. The flashy stuff can wait until you have enough knowledge to evaluate it and enough reserves to survive if it fails. Because when you're starting out, a single bad bet can erase years of discipline in a single week.
Mistake number 7, doing it alone without a financial blueprint. Ray Dalio didn't build Bridgewater, the world's largest hedge fund, by figuring it out as he went. He built a system, a set of principles, a written framework that guided every decision, and he documented it obsessively, long before he was famous, long before the billions came. Most people with $10,000 in the bank have no written financial plan. Not a budget, not a target, not a single sheet of paper that says, here is where I am, here is where I want to go, and here's exactly how I plan to get there. And without that, every financial decision is reactive, emotional, inconsistent. A financial blueprint doesn't need to be complicated. It needs to answer 4 questions. What is my monthly income? What are my fixed expenses? What is my savings rate target? And where does every dollar above my expenses go? That's it. 4 questions, 1 page. But here's the thing. The people who write it down are dramatically more likely to follow it. Research from Dominican University found that people who write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them. Not because the act of writing is magic, but because clarity eliminates the fog that lets bad habits survive in the first place. When your plan is in your head, it's negotiable. When it's on paper, it's a commitment.
Here's what all 7 of these mistakes have in common. They don't look like mistakes in the moment. They look like normal. They look like reasonable. They look like what everyone around you is doing. And that's precisely the problem. Because what everyone is doing is why most people will retire with less than $50,000 in savings, despite working for 40 years, despite trying, despite wanting more. The people who actually build wealth, the Chris Saccas who go from borrowing $12 to building hundreds of millions, they do something different. They treat money like a craftsman treats tools, with intention, with a plan, with relentless discipline about what they will and won't allow their money to do. They understand that $10,000 is not a destination, it's an ignition switch. Whether it starts an engine or just burns out depends entirely on the choices you make in the next 90 days. So let me recap the 7 things to stop doing immediately. Stop treating $10,000 as a reward and start treating it as a resource. Stop letting it idle in a low-interest account while inflation silently erodes it. Stop attacking debt emotionally instead of mathematically.
Stop waiting until you know more before you invest. Start now with what you know. Stop upgrading your lifestyle every time your income rises. Protect the gap. Stop chasing investments you don't understand because they look exciting. And stop navigating all of this without a written plan, because clarity is the foundation everything else is built on. Now, you might be watching this and thinking, I'm already doing some of these things. And if you are, genuinely, that's great. You're ahead of the curve. But I challenge you to be honest about whether you're doing all of them, because the truth is, most people are doing 3 or 4 of these well and quietly sabotaging themselves with the other 3. That's how $10,000 stays $10,000 for 5 years, despite good intentions. Not one big mistake. 7 small ones running simultaneously in the background. Here's what I want you to do right now. Take out your phone, open the Notes app. Write down the one mistake from this list that you know, honestly, you're currently making. Just one. You don't have to fix everything today. But commit to fixing that one thing this week. Because wealth isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in small, consistent corrections made over time. If you found this useful, share it with someone who just hit a savings milestone. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because the moment you have something to protect is exactly when you need this information most. I'll see you in the next one.